Thanks, guys. Good morning, everybody. Breaking news this morning. The new director of the FBI about to appear before Congress. Christopher Wray is his name. He will take questions amid escalating accusations about the agency's integrity, and this could get hot. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Hemmer. A lot on the line here, live inside of America's Newsroom. And good morning at home. Sandra, good morning.
Good morning to you, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith. The director's appearance today comes amid new revelations in the Russia investigation. The Justice Department is now poring over 10,000 text messages between FBI agent Peter Strzok, the man pulled from the Mueller team's investigation, and his mistress. Congressman Trey Gowdy says this kind of problem does not reflect well on the agency.
I still think that Mueller can produce a product that we all have confidence in, but things like this make it really difficult. The perception is every bit as important as the reality, and if the perception is you're employing people who are biased, it makes it really difficult for those of us who would like to defend the integrity of former prosecutors and heads of the FBI.
We've got a big show for you today. Congressman Trey Gowdy will be in today's hearing. He is standing by. But we begin with Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live on Capitol Hill for us this morning. Good morning, Catherine.
Well, good morning, Sandra. We're expecting lawmakers on the House Judiciary Committee to really drill down on this issue of alleged bias on the Clinton email investigation as well as the Russia investigation. Fox News confirmed late yesterday that they had uncovered more than 10,000 text messages sent by Peter Strzok to an FBI lawyer with whom he was romantically involved. And it was in these texts that there were anti-Trump sentiments. Justice Department officials say it could take several weeks to review all of the text messages before they can be provided to the House Intelligence Committee. But some Republicans are already crying foul, saying the Justice Department and FBI are slow rolling the release of those records. In addition, this week, the revelation after a Judicial Watch federal lawsuit that there was an email from Andrew Weissman, he's now a top deputy on the Russia probe under Robert Mueller, to then acting Attorney General Sally Yates. It was January 30th, and Yates had just been fired by the president for refusing to defend the travel ban. And Andrew Weissman writes in that email under the subject line, "I am so proud and in awe, grateful thanks, and deepest respect." So people will have to decide for themselves whether that is another indicator of bias on the Russia investigation. Two senators, Grassley and Johnson, have sent a letter to the Justice Department asking whether they are aware of any other incidents that are in line with the Strzok case and now the Weissman email. Sandra.
A lot going on there. Catherine, what about the dossier issue? The FBI has kind of been dragging its feet there.
Well, that's the other big issue to watch today in terms of the Russia case. You'll recall that the head of an opposition research firm, Glenn Simpson, that's Fusion GPS, we have confirmation now that their research for the dossier was funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. The questions Republicans want answered is to what extent the FBI relied on that unverified dossier to obtain surveillance warrants which captured the communications of Trump campaign associates. And here's one of the members of the committee just a short time ago on the issue.
The Clinton campaign paid Russians for this report, this dossier, and it's been reported that this dossier was all dressed up by the government, taken to the FISA court, and became the basis to spy on Americans. So I think that's what happened. All the evidence points to that as being what took place. But Christopher Wray can clear this all up.
There may also be some movement on this issue. We were told that the Justice Department and FBI may be willing to make key witnesses available to the House Intelligence Committee. They would include Strzok, Andrew McCabe, an FBI deputy director, as well as the FBI agent who was really the point person, the handler for Christopher Steele, the British spy who gathered the research for the dossier. But if that happens in the near future, this would be in a closed, non-public setting, so we would not be able to hear the testimony about those issues. Sandra.
Catherine Herridge, thank you.
Congressman Trey Gowdy was in yesterday's closed-door session with Donald Trump Jr. He will be in today's hearing as well, but first he joins us live. And, sir, welcome back. Good morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Ray took over for Comey when Comey was fired by the president back in May. What's your first question?
What are you going to do to restore people's confidence and trust in the Department of Justice? Because they've had a miserable 2 years, Bill. It's not just Strzok. That's the latest. And I'm afraid Strzok is not going to be the last. I think there will be other revelations of bias and prejudice and improper conduct on behalf of the Department of Justice. So my first question to him is, what are you going to do to repair not Congress's trust, but the American people's trust and that blindfolded woman holding a set of scales?
The other day, the president said the reputation of the FBI is in tatters. Based on that answer, I guess you agree with the president.
Well, this is where I would, well, I worked with line agents, the line women and men who are back in South Carolina and other states, and their reputation is not in tatters. They are exactly the kind of people we want working in our Justice Department. But the higher-ups have had a really bad 2 years. And right now, the American people aren't focused on the line agents in Spartanburg and Greenville, South Carolina. They're focused on Comey and McCabe and Comey and now Wray. So it's the higher-ups that's reputations are under assault, not the line agents.
Is the integrity of the agency in question then now?
Of course it is. I mean, Congress should not have to fight with the FBI to access information that we're entitled to. We should not have to threaten contempt of Congress. I don't want the drama of a contempt of Congress floor fight. I want the information that we're entitled to be able to do our jobs, and we shouldn't have to fight with the Department of Justice to access that information. When
they changed the wording to extremely careless on the Hillary Clinton email matter, was that wrong?
That's one of a half dozen things that this particular agent did. But keep in mind, Bill, why he did it. Gross negligence is the phrase in the statute. So that was the phraseology in the initial draft that tracked the statute. Well, it's really difficult to say we're not going to prosecute you under a statute when we use the precise words. So he changed it to extremely careless. There is no difference. The only difference is they weren't going to charge her, so they didn't want to use the words of the statute, and they changed them. My bigger problem is if he had pro-Clinton or anti-Trump bias, what the hell was he doing interviewing Hillary Clinton?
Donald Trump Jr. answered questions for 10 hours yesterday. Is that right? You were in that room?
Close to 10, but it seemed longer.
You said he was, quote, incredibly professional. Did he break any laws, sir?
No. I don't even think he did anything improper. I mean, you know, differing minds can quibble about whether or not you should accept an offer to provide Oppo research. Keep in mind the DNC was paying $10 million to do Oppo research on Trump. Now, the only difference is we don't have an email, but Glenn Simpson from Fusion GPS reportedly met with this exact same Russian lawyer before and after Donald Trump Jr. did. We just don't have an email memorializing it. So if we're going to outlaw Oppo...
Yeah, that meeting was in Trump Tower of June of 2016. And apparently he had a conversation about that meeting with his father, then candidate Trump, about 3 weeks later. That seems to be the timeline that I've put together based on reading the excerpts from yesterday.
I think it was 11 months later, and I think that is a big distinction. The meeting was in June of 2016. Correct. The conversations with his father were July of 17. Oh,
wow, look at that. Well, that is a big distinction. So 13 months later, okay.
Yes,
Your
sir.
colleague, Democrat Adam Schiff, said he cited attorney-client privilege with regard to that conversation. Adam Schiff's got a real problem with that. Do you?
Well, it's funny. Adam does not have a problem when Democrat witnesses cite privileges. Glenn Simpson cited a privilege nobody's ever heard of before. He cited some judge in Alaska for some First Amendment privilege that no one's ever heard of before, and Adam didn't have a problem with that. So what I would ask Adam and all my Democrat colleagues is apply the same standard to Republican witnesses as you do Democrat witnesses. Maybe then the public would have more confidence in our investigations. But number one, when you leak what happened after you said you wouldn't, and then you mischaracterize it, of course nobody's going to have confidence in our investigation.
Two more quick things on that. Then can he, you're an attorney, is he legally allowed to cite that privilege in that closed-door hearing yesterday?
He is, unless there's a waiver. And Adam went through the whole litany of questions to establish whether or not there'd been a waiver, and the answer to every one of them was no. So I get that Adam didn't like the answers, but those are the answers.
Got it. Last question. How significant is the hearing today? What should viewers be listening for?
whether or not they trust this person to restore the reputation of the FBI. That's all they should be listening for. Is this the right person for us to have confidence in the nation's premier law enforcement agency going forward?
We're watching at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Sir, thank you for your time. Trey Gowdy,
yes, sir.
A Republican from South Carolina on the Hill. Thanks. 10 minutes past.
Crews facing an uphill battle as they fight to contain 3 major wildfires burning in Southern California. Officials say it could get worse before it will get any better. Right now, the focus on the Thomas fire north of Los Angeles. It has scorched more than 140 square miles and prompted evacuation orders for tens of thousands of people. Authorities say the weather is not helping.
The extremely low relative humidity, that's going to cause our fuels that are already desiccated in the late fall condition to continue to dry. There's a lot of potential for some large fire growth on the north and west side of this fire in the next 24 to 48 hours.
The fires have destroyed nearly 200 homes and buildings so far. Winds are expected to get stronger and stronger and continue to fan those flames. We will be live on the ground later this hour. What a horrible situation.
Yeah, we were all captivated by the images that were coming before the sun came up yesterday, right along that 405 freeway. So we'll hope for the best today.
And so many risking their lives to fight those fires.
Yeah, and the winds are really tough stuff, too. So that's coming up here. Also, 11 minutes past the hour, another story to watching. Embattled Minnesota Democratic Senator Al Franken will be making an announcement today on his future after an avalanche of resignation calls. But what will he do? What will he decide? We'll bring you there live in a moment. Plus, there is this today. Have a listen.
It could happen. The Democrats are really looking at something that is very dangerous for our country. They are looking at shutting down.
A high-stakes showdown looms in Washington. President Trump calling out Democrats yet again, just hours before a big meeting at the White House. South Dakota Senator John Thune is a key senator involved on everything from the shutdown battle to tax reform, and he will be here live. Plus this.
These are ongoing clashes in the West Bank as Hamas calls for a new uprising in response to President Trump's announcement on Jerusalem. We are live on the ground to let you know what's happening on that front today. Coming up.
We don't want to see killings. We don't want to see violence. But let's be clear. Let's do a reality check. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. So we're acknowledging something that's common sense to everyone.
I hope that he'll do the right thing and step aside.
I feel that there's been a series of allegations that are serious, and that when he speaks to the nation and to folks back home in Minnesota, that would be the best step for if he stepped down.
I do not feel that he should continue to serve. Everyone will make their own judgment. I hope they do make their own judgment.
Senator Al Franken facing an avalanche of calls now to step aside. Senate Democrats now on board that idea, the majority anyway. We're awaiting an announcement from the Democratic senator. This comes only 2 days after the veteran Democrat out of Detroit, John Conyers, resigned as well. I want to bring in Fox News politics editor Chris Starwell. Chris, how you doing? Welcome back to the morning show here. We've missed you,
Brother Bill.
Friend. 48 Democrats currently serving the Senate. 32 have said step aside. Why did the dam break yesterday?
Well, I think in part it was because allegations kept coming, and you had another accusation that was particularly gross that came forward. But the other thing is Kirsten Gillibrand has emerged as really the leader on this issue. Her prominence in the Democratic Party in the Senate, Democrats, has grown and grown. And on this one, she basically, it looks like to me that she said this is going to happen. And that Chuck Schumer, her fellow New York senator, basically said, okay, here we go. And then it began. And the Republicans can take a lesson from how the Democrats handled this issue. It was clearly a series of coordinated strikes. It kept rolling out throughout the day until at the close of the day, the Senate Democratic leader, Schumer, comes forward and says, it's time to go.
With this, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, this is from Franken's Twitter feed, all right? Senator Franken's talking with his family at this time and his plans to make an announcement in D.C. tomorrow. Any reports of a final decision are inaccurate. So What does he do? I mean, you mentioned Chuck Schumer said step aside. He's the Democratic leader in the Senate.
Even those who have done wrong are deserving of mercy. So I don't want to be too unkind here, but Al Franken probably kind of needs to get over himself. This is it is beyond him now. And part of the reason that he's going to have to step down is the way that he botched his response to all of this and refusing to take ownership of it. Refusing to say, he did the fake apology, the non-apology. I'm sorry you felt bad. I'm sorry you felt uncomfortable. Not, I'm sorry I made you uncomfortable. His refusal to actually own this thing and to deal with it as some sort of a nuisance that he was going to brush aside was a big part of why he has ended up in this situation.
We're just getting this now. This is an update. That tweet I just read was from last night, and now Al Franken says 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time he'll make a statement from the floor of the Senate. So we'll wait until then. Is that a surprise to you?
Yeah. What if he decided to stay and fight? If he decided to stay and fight and tell most all of his fellow Democrats, oh yeah, well, I'm not going anywhere, it would be an incredible blessing for Republicans. It would be a huge blessing for Republicans who are right now facing the prospect of Roy Moore potentially arriving in their midst. That would be if Al Franken wants to help the Republican, Al Franken can do more for the Republican Party today if he stays and fights his fellow Democrats and puts them in this terrible position and does all of that. It will be an enormous boon to Donald Trump and Roy Moore. So I'm sure they will be cheering him on this morning.
That vote is Tuesday next week in Alabama. What you're suggesting is that if he were to resign, he would do it from his office and not from the Senate floor?
Yeah, I mean, why are you going? Maybe he's going to go and give a farewell address. Maybe he just does that. But I would think this. I would think this, that instead, if you were going to resign, you just resign. No, if you're resigning in disgrace, nobody particularly wants to hear about your disgrace. As John Conyers found out, you can call it retirement, you can call it whatever you want, but when you leave under a cloud of scandal, you're just leaving. So Franken going to the Senate floor, that has it has some potential that maybe he wants to make a scene. Maybe he wants to put his fellow Democrats into anguish over the anguish that he feels they've caused him.
Yeah. We're guessing at the moment, but 11:45 we should know, if not before then. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Chris Darwalt, D.C., thanks. 9:20 Eastern Time.
Authorities warning of unprecedented conditions as massive wildfires continue to tear through Southern California. Those are live images coming into our newsroom at this moment. We will be live on the ground right after the break with more on that. This as the scope of the destruction is clearly coming into focus. Some folks losing their homes in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot of memories. Everything you build memories in a house. From everywhere we went, all our travels, and just everything.
Just to repeat the headline a moment ago, Al Franken on the floor of the Senate, 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time. That's the word now from his official Twitter account just moments ago. Certainly live coverage. What will he do? We do not know. But the recent accusations against him, 32 Democrats on the Senate side yesterday saying he should step aside. So we'll see what he says when he says it. Jason Chaffetz reminds us moments ago during the commercial break, what you say on the floor of the Senate gives you immunity. You cannot be prosecuted for it. I'm not suggesting that has anything to do with what he has to say today, but it may explain the reason why he chose the venue today.
And this, of course, coming after an outpouring of calls from Democrats
a lot of them.
To step down. But still, we're not getting any guidance as to what exactly he plans to say on the Senate floor. So that coming up in a couple hours. All right. Well, meanwhile, another big story today. Southern California bracing for potential hurricane-force winds at this hour as crews battle 3 major wildfires that have forced tens of thousands of people from their homes. Stunning images coming in live to our newsroom right now. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt is reporting live from Ventura. Jonathan, you got onto the front lines overnight. What did you see? How was that?
Yeah, it's a pretty rare opportunity to get right onto the front line, Sandra. It is in part terrifying. It is in part inspiring as you watch the heroic efforts of firefighters. Here's what it looked like. We're in the hills above Santa Paula in Ventura County here, and what firefighters are doing is try to prevent the flames that are burning here from jumping these roads. So they've been setting backfires. The intensity of the flame quite extraordinary at this point, and you can see the firefighters all backing off now away from it. This is an intense firefight. It is likely to go on for at least another 24 hours. And thanks to the skills and, in no short measure, the bravery of those firefighters, Sandra, they were able to halt the forward progress of those flames and save the small city of Santa Paula, for now at least. Sandra?
Jonathan, a lot of fears today with those high winds.
Yeah, and interesting, just as the sun is coming up here now, Sandra, the winds have been picking up. It has been extremely still, but we can feel it coming now. And the forecast is that the wind gusts could get up as high as 70 to 80 miles per hour. That would be hurricane force winds combined with these fires. You can imagine how deadly and dangerous that is. The town of Ojai, which is a picturesque town that sits sort of between LA and Santa Barbara, is one of those most at risk now. You can look at some live pictures there. The flames creeping down the hillsides towards that town. Firefighters there and across Southern California face a treacherous and very dangerous 24 hours ahead today, Sandra.
Jonathan Hunt, thank you.
Meanwhile, overseas, there is outrage erupting in parts of the Middle East at this hour. Watch. So Hamas calling for days of rage after the president recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. We are live on the ground for reaction in Bethlehem coming up in moments here.
Plus, our top story of the day, moments from now, FBI Director Christopher Wray set to face House lawmakers as we learn new details about FBI agent Peter Strzok. Can he offer anything to restore the people's trust?
We now know that had Hillary won, the corruption would have gotten bigger. It would have gotten deeper. We have never learned any of this. And I think it's pretty appalling. The level of corruption we're beginning to see in the FBI.
31 past the hour now. Protests breaking out now in the West Bank and other parts of the Middle East. Palestinian leaders calling for days of rage on behalf of Hamas and others. President Trump yesterday recognizing Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel, and the ambassador at the UN, Nikki Haley, calling it symbolic and more.
We are no closer to a lasting peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. It would be folly to assume that repeating the exact same formula would now produce a different or better result. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
He made a symbolic move to say we are committed to the peace process. We are committed to seeing Israelis and Palestinians come together at peace. But at the same time, we're going to do what the American people have asked us to do.
Connor Powell now live in Jerusalem for the very latest today. Connor, hello.
Yeah, Bill, the morning started out relatively quiet and peaceful with some protests around Jerusalem that, for the most part, were uneventful. But by early afternoon, the violence that so many people had warned President Trump would likely occur if he had made this decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, it began to erupt in Bethlehem, in Ramallah, and some other places in the Palestinian West Bank areas. Palestinians were already going into this decision angry at the economic situation, angry with the Israeli military checkpoints, and angry with the sort of stalled peace process. This decision not only frustrated them, but brought out that anger. Clashes between Israelis and Palestinian taking place in Bethlehem, with Israeli security forces firing tear gas and Palestinians throwing rocks and using slingshots to fire rocks at Israeli soldiers. In Ramallah, we saw them burning tires and similar clashes, also in places like Hebron. In Jerusalem, it's a very different story. There were some smaller protests, some scuffles, but nothing major. There were cheers and celebrations among Israelis. Last night, they put images of the American flag on the wall of the Old old Jerusalem city. A lot of celebration and happiness, jubilation among Israelis. But the violence that we're seeing here in the West Bank, the question going forward, Bill, is very much, does this sustain itself? Is this something we're going to see for 1 or 2 days, this day or days of rage? Or does this snowball into something much worse, like what we saw over the fight over the Haram al-Sharif, the Western Wall that we saw several months ago? That has the potential, this has the potential to spiral into something like that, and that is what is potentially so dangerous and scary for people watching this area.
We are watching along with you. Thank you. Connor Powell live in Jerusalem.
Well, we are now awaiting FBI Director Chris Wray on Capitol Hill, where he is set to testify before the House Judiciary Committee. That happening at the top of the hour. And on the top of lawmakers' minds, of course, will be the Russia investigation and recent questions about the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Congressman Trey Gowdy was on just moments ago, and he says this is only the beginning.
It's not just Strzok. That's the latest. And I'm afraid Strzok is not going to be the last. I think there will be other revelations of bias and prejudice and improper conduct on behalf of the Department of Justice. So my first question to him is, what are you going to do to repair not Congress's trust, but the American people's trust in that blindfolded woman holding a set of scales?
Big question there. Joining me now are Doug Schoen, former advisor to President Bill Clinton and a Fox News contributor, on set with me, and Thomas Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. All right, well represented here. And the big question today, and likely a big question that they're going to be, talking about a lot today, is the FBI corrupt, Doug?
Well, we don't really know how to answer that. And pains me, Sandra, as an American, to say that, because the issues with Peter Strzok, the issues with the dossier, and the issues with the way the FBI has operated raise real questions that Christopher Wray is going to not only have to answer today, but address systematically. And it does raise questions. I wish I could say Trey Gowdy was exaggerating. Sadly, he's not.
Well, there's likely to be a lot of questions about this double standard, Tom, that a block of House Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee say that there has been a double standard playing out with these investigations on the treatment of President Trump and the treatment of Hillary Clinton during the email investigation.
And, Senator, I'll say I have been very discouraged by these recent revelations. Certainly when I served in the Justice Department, the department and the FBI really were the gold standard of integrity, and that they were universally regarded as these nonpartisan bastions of integrity committed to law enforcement. And now what we're seeing is that there appear to be at least some people who played critical roles both in the Hillary Clinton investigation and now in the Trump investigation who really do seem to have been motivated by a partisan agenda that is completely the opposite. It's antithetical to everything the Justice Department and the FBI stands for, which is the neutral, independent, nonpartisan enforcement of the laws.
Newt Gingrich was on earlier, and he made it very clear that the average person working at the FBI, man or woman, is still a hardworking, honest person. But this isn't just one mistake. Listen.
The average FBI agent is still as honest and as serious and as hardworking as ever. But at the very top, the Justice Department and the FBI became corrupted. And I think we have to be honest and use that language. This is not an occasional mistake. This was covering up for the next president, they thought, covering up for their foundation, covering up for their relationship with Russia and Uranium One, covering up for the entire process of investigation.
If that's all true, Christopher Wray has a big job to do in restoring the trust, as Trey Gowdy said, not just of Republicans and Democrats, but of the American people.
I agree, Sandra. And one of the things I've said, and I would renew it here this morning, we need a special prosecutor on Uranium One to investigate how that deal went down, how the dossier came to be prepared and put together, how the FBI came to get it. All of those issues, I think, need to be aired because the integrity of our criminal justice system and Secretary Clinton are up for grabs.
What do you think, Tom? New investigations, do they need to be opened?
Well, I think it's certainly worth looking at. I guess where I might slightly depart ways is the question of whether we need to be appointing new special prosecutors and new special counsels.
I just don't trust Bob Mueller to do both investigations at the same time and think we're going to get someone else.
I wouldn't put it under Mueller's jurisdiction, that's for sure. But what I'm concerned about is we just seen from American history, when you put these special counsels in play, they often take on a life of their own. And these investigations can go for decades, go off in directions no one ever anticipated. So while I certainly think all of these are issues that bear investigation and looking into, I guess I would be a little bit cautious about saying, let's create someone new, a special prosecutor, to look into this.
You know, Doug, you brought up a really point about that dossier, because things have gotten a little bit quiet when it comes to that dossier, but here's Jim Jordan talking about just that yesterday. Oh, we don't have that sound. He's saying his question was this dossier discredited, the dossier paid for by DNC and Clinton money? Of course, that's a question I would toss to you.
Well, yeah, first, you know, nobody knows how that dossier got put together. It was allegedly a lawyer, I think Mr. Elias, spending $13.5 million apparently on his own instigation. That strains credulity. How was the dossier put together by Mr. Steele? Who contributed in Russia? What were the underlying economic and political arrangements? What is the veracity of it? What was the role of the FBI with it? Those are questions I think we need to get litigated. And look, Bob Mueller's got a lot on his plate. The point I was trying to make is I don't really think he should do both investigations, but whether it be the Justice Department or another special prosecutor, we need a full independent investigation of the FBI.
Tom, set this up for us, because this is set to begin in just about 20 minutes. The FBI and Christopher Wray, quite frankly, in the hot seat, going to face a grilling from Republican lawmakers there on the House Judiciary Committee.
I certainly don't envy Chris Wray at this moment. He is going to be on the hot seat today, and I think he has a big task in front of him. He is going to need to reassure this committee, and more importantly, the American people, that the FBI remains a neutral, independent law enforcement agency. He's, number one, going to have to explain how Strzok and other people with partisan interests were playing such integral roles in all of these investigations. Then he's also going to have to explain what steps he's putting in place to ensure that any taint of bias or partisan politics has been purged from these ongoing investigations. It's a big task. I think Chris Wray is a man of integrity. I think he's talented. I think he's up to the job, and we'll see how he does today.
And I think we'll see him in a few minutes. Tom Dupree, thank you. And Doug Schoen, thanks for joining us on Set this morning.
We are now hearing Senator Al Franken makes a statement 2 hours from now. He'll be back on the floor of the Senate, 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time. This, as the dam broke yesterday, more than 30 Democratic senators calling for him to resign. So more on that in a moment. Plus, there is this.
The House and Senate are now negotiating the final bill, and I cannot wait to sign these giant tax cuts and reforms. I mentioned tax cuts, but it's also reforms. But I'm looking forward to signing it. It'll be the largest tax cuts by far in the history of our country.
President Trump pushing hard, selling tax reform as it enters the home stretch. The Senate votes to go to conference with the House. John Thune, chairman of the Senate Republican Conference, on where the votes are today.
So the Democrats maybe will want to shut down the country because they want people flowing into our country. And I want people coming into our country, but I want to vet those people, and I want to vet them very carefully.
President Trump suggesting this fight over immigration could lead to a government shutdown. Congress needs an agreement on a spending bill before a deadline tomorrow, and even then it might just be a 2-week extension. Senator John Thune, chairman of the Senate Republican Conference, with me now, and thank you for your time, for being with us today. I got a couple things to go over. The shutdown. How do you get a government shutdown when Republicans control the House and the Senate?
Well, you know, the thing about the Senate, of course, as you know, on a spending bill, it takes 60 votes in the Senate. We only have 52 Republicans, which means we have to have Democrats work with us. And so we can't ignore the Democrats in these discussions, and that's the purpose of the meeting this afternoon at the White House between the Democrat leadership, the Republican leadership, and the president. Hopefully they'll get a path forward. But in the meantime, we will pass a short-term 2-week funding bill that will get us up, I think, until December the 22nd, and that vote should happen later today.
Okay. Do you fear a shutdown here, or is that at the top of your mind?
Well, there's no appetite for a shutdown. That's just absolutely not necessary, Bill. I think that when they sit down this afternoon, hopefully they can negotiate an agreement that will enable us to fund the government for the next year, to do some of the other things that we need to be able to do. But obviously, I think that Democrats probably view it as a political opportunity if the government were to shut down. But I'm hoping that cooler heads will prevail, that both sides will come together, and that we'll be able to get the bipartisan majority that we need in the Senate to pass a longer-term funding bill.
All right, so we see where we go on that. We just heard from the president. You're in conference right now on this tax bill. He has a different phrase for it. Watch here.
I call it the mixer. It's in conference right now, but I call it the mixer. I think when it comes out, it's going to be a beautiful mix. There are things that I like better in the Senate bill. There are things that I like better in the House bill. I think when they come out, we'll have some new additions, and we'll have the best of each. I think we're going to have a fantastic tax bill.
All right, so I don't know if it's a batter or a mixer, but whatever it is, you're now in a new phase.
Right.
I think what Americans want to know is what's changing in the bill that they need to understand that affects them.
Well, the nice thing about the process, and of course the conference committee is the last step in the process before we get a bill through the House and the Senate and on the president's desk, which I hope we will get done before Christmas, is the Senate bill moved closer to the House. And we're very in a position, I think, to merge those bills. There are a couple of key differences that we'll have to work through, but by and large, well, I think the issue of how you treat state and local tax deduction is something where the House and the Senate are in slightly different places. How we treat pass-through businesses, we'll have to figure out how we take the two bills and reconcile those when it comes to pass-throughs. But by and large, you've got the doubling of the standard deduction, you've got the expansion of the child tax credit, you got the lower rates on both individuals and businesses in both bills, and those are the key elements of the bill. They're the foundation. Those are the things that we use to deliver meaningful tax relief to hardworking Americans. Yeah, and I think we'll get there.
I mean, look at the calendar right now. You've got about 3 weeks to do this. You mentioned Christmas. Will you get this done in 2017?
We will, and there's a sense of urgency about it. We know both House and Senate negotiators are already, there are informal discussions that are occurring. We're going to have to sit down in a more formal context, obviously, to negotiate the finer points, but we need to get a bill out of the conference committee, hopefully sometime next week, and eventually on the president's desk before the Christmas holiday.
Any chance you're there between Christmas and New Year's?
Well, you never know, Bill. I've been here on both Christmas Eve and I've been here on New Year's Eve in the past, and if we are, it'll probably be on something else. I think the tax bill should be done, and if we end up with some prolonged debate on the spending bill, but I hope that both can be negotiated. I think when people come to the table in good faith, you can make that happen.
It's lovely in the Capitol this time of year. I think you would agree with that.
Well, I'd rather be somewhere else.
A more serious tone here. There's a vote in Alabama on Tuesday with Roy Moore, a major point of consternation in Congress right now, and Al Franken in 2 hours will make an announcement about his future on the floor of the Senate. What is your reflection on how this is hitting Washington now?
It's hitting Washington just like it's hitting business and entertainment and in every area of life. And it's a wake-up call for all of us. We've got to address these issues in a different way. There's got to be accountability to the American people on these issues. And I think then when you've got people who are behaving badly, they've got to be held accountable. And obviously that's the case with both Al Franken and Roy Moore.
A lot of people want to know about the slush fund, hush fund, and the future for that. So I hope we can continue that conversation and find out about what's happening with that. So.
We absolutely have to. You're right.
John Thune, thank you, sir. The senator from South Dakota on the Hill. Thank you. More breaking news now. Sandra.
Continuing to come out of Southern California, this breaking news for you as flames stretch as far as the eye can see. Firefighters say winds could reach up to 50 miles an hour today, making fighting those wildfires even harder. More on that in just a moment.
Also, how much did the jury know about the illegal immigrant acquitted in the Kate Steinle murder trial? One of those jurors now speaking out for the very first time since that verdict a week ago.
Well, we were told at the beginning of the trial that immigration was not at issue in this trial. It did not pertain to the evidence or the law surrounding the specific charges that were at issue.